Let's start with this hearing cancellation. What's your reaction in the fact that, we're even hearing from Democrats say this is shocking and really backs, no traditional path?
Well, first of all, nothing on Capitol Hill shocks me anymore. The operative phrase in that statement you just showed us was public testimony. My understanding is that the Secretary of DHS and the FBI Director are willing to provide some form of threats assessment in a classified setting.
Right. And let me stop you for a second, because we actually have a statement attributable to the FBI saying FBI leaders have testified extensively in public settings about the current threat environment, and they believe the committee would benefit most from further substantive discussions and additional information that can only be provided in a classified setting.
Correct. And I'll also add what Ken alluded to. Ali Mayorkas is on his way out. It's reported that the FBI director may be on his way out, and they probably simply don't want to subject themselves to the circus that has become congressional hearings. And frankly, and I've been through these threats hearings myself a number of times when I was in office. They're with all due respect to Chairman Peters and some other members of the Senate, these hearings are not a meaningful exchange of information. It's political accusations and innuendo, and they could do a printed, unclassified statement to convey threats hearings, and I'm sure they have in multiple different contexts. So they're on their way out, and they're probably thinking, why do I need this?
Yeah,
so
on the way out.
They won't say it, but I will.
FBI Director Christopher Wray may be on the way out. Again, he was a Trump appointee.
Yeah.
What kind of instability does it create if he ends up fired?
So, all kinds. This transition period is even more unsettling than the one we went through 8 years ago with an incoming Trump administration, which I was part of. I was part of the outgoing administration. And you have an entire bureaucracy in Justice, Defense, ODNI, DHS that are all very, very anxious about the leadership that may be coming in the door. And we could talk about each of the individual nominees. I have thoughts about that.
What's your biggest concern? Which ones are you worried about most?
Well, I have a number of concerns. First of all, we're having conversations about settled claims of sexual assault and a not-for-public House Ethics Committee investigation of claims of paying prostitutes for people who are being evaluated for the most important, powerful positions in our United States government. We're not talking about hiring somebody for a blue-collar job. With all due respect to blue-collar jobs, we're talking about hiring somebody for the most important positions in the most powerful government in the world. And the discussion has degenerated into whether or not a nominee paid a prostitute and whether or not a nominee engaged in sexual assault. And it is not, frankly, it is not the answer that Lindsey Graham puts forth, that just because the president is of your same party, he gets a pass on nominees. The Senate has a constitutional obligation to advise and consent on a nominee, irrespective of party. I went through 3 presidential appointments, Senate confirmations, and I certainly did not get a pass when I was nominated by a Democratic president and confirmed by a Democratic majority Senate. The vetting is and should be quite extensive, down to the nationality of the person who cleans your house, to the summer job I had when I was age 18. The vetting should be
But I guess the question is, even if that vetting were to turn something up that is more egregious than what we've already learned based on this reporting, I mean, will it even matter when you have somebody like Donald Trump selecting people who in many ways don't have the experience or resumes that are traditionally the type that you would expect for these positions?
Correct. All of that sensational stuff aside, which deserves to be aired, you take the nominee for the Department of Defense. Frankly, I do not believe he's qualified for the job. The Department of Defense is the largest department of our government, 1.3 million active duty service members, something like 3 million employees, the largest budget of our government. I was the general counsel of that department for 4 years before I became secretary of DHS. Congressional relations, inspector general reports, organized training and equipping the largest military, close to the largest military in the world, and you're in the warfighting chain of command. You're part of the National Command Authority. That job, in my humble judgment, takes someone like a Bob Gates or a Leon Panetta, not someone, with all due respect, a cable news host who was a cable news host. And so we're losing sight of that. We're losing sight of the Senate's obligation to evaluate the basic qualifications of the nominee
for the
job.
About something that you have a lot of experience in when it comes to the Department of Homeland Security, issues of immigration and border security. Let's talk about this mass deportation plan. One Trump campaign official saying there will be changes at a pace that is, quote, like nothing you've seen in history. And here is Trump's pick to be his border czar on Fox News last night, discussing what will happen if people try to stop them.
Well, first of all, so those people who say they're going to stop us from what they're doing, they will not. I'm going to do this job. Men and women of ICE are going to do this job. You're not going to stop us. But let me give you a word of advice. If you impede us, there's going to be consequences.
My understanding is a key part of the DHS work is partnering with local and state authorities. Right. How do you see this playing out?
So Tom Homan used to work for me when he was director of ICE enforcement operations. And what you just heard makes for good cable TV, but it's not the reality in the street. Even Tom would say and has said that you have to have enforcement priorities in who we remove from this country. And the enforcement priorities, whether it's a Trump administration or an Obama administration or a Biden administration, are public safety, national security, threats, and recent border crossers. You have to start there. You just have to.
So you think he's just blowing hot air?
Well, it becomes a question of resources. And I would much rather see ERO going after those who are already in jail, who are then deportable once they finish their sentence because they're undocumented, national security threats, gang members, recent border crossers, and going after somebody who's been in this country 10 or 12 years, committed no crimes, have children who are born in this country, who are U.S. citizens, simply turbocharges the sanctuary cities movement to make it harder to work with local law enforcement on getting at the priorities, on getting at the public safety threats, because local law enforcement, their city councils will tell them, do not cooperate with ICE.